with Breaking Black Podcast. You're here with your host, Tina G, and my lovely co-host, Fancy Arlee. We had a previous episode where we talked about Eurocentric beauty standards and the impact that it has on people of color in terms of our beauty standards not being equally represented. We played a video where a few different women from different demographics were talking about how they felt about imposed Eurocentric beauty standards. And so I have another video that I want to play that's going to kind of cover a different perspective. We're also going to hear from the men in terms of how they feel about imposed Eurocentric beauty standards. Take a look.
I grew up in a mostly white suburban town in New Jersey.
I would say there were about 3,500 white folks, 200 blacks, and they were all living in the poorest section of town, and 5 Asians, and that was my family.
I am black and I was raised very culturally black, and I identify very strongly with my blackness.
But at that time, it was only black and white. Asians were just foreigners.
All the LGBTQ movies or TV show I saw was all majority white, and I saw them, they're like, oh, they're attractive, and they're like happy being gay in the TV, whatever. That's the moment like I fantasize because I want to be like them. I want to be as happy as they are.
As a person who has been in a relationship with a person who is not black, a person who's white, it has made me very aware of the bubble of privilege that white men live in, white women live in.
We still hold whiteness as like the absolute.
This girl who happened to be Dominican made a comment to me. She was like, oh yeah, guys don't like girls with nappy hair.
So when people kept saying, oh, you're kind of cute for an Asian guy, or you look kind of mixed, yeah, you're cute. And at the time, I took it as a compliment because I was like, yeah, I can pass off as a white guy, or I can pass off as American, so I'm very good looking.
I started like wondering my self-worth. I was like, am I not attractive?
So I would dye my hair blonde, have blue contacts.
I still struggle sometimes with like, how am I gonna be received when I go into this new space and these people are just meeting me for the first time?
Not necessarily just talking about people of the black race, but Asian people from the LGBTQ community, people who are dating biracially. A lot of times we feel like we don't fit into those Eurocentric standards in many different ways, right? It doesn't necessarily mean the color of our skin or our hair or things like that, but a lot of times if you're not white American, maybe male, rich, maybe feel like you don't fit in, or you're trying to get as close to that as possible, maybe just by the way that you speak, or maybe just by the way that, the people that you hang around with, or things of that nature. So I know for me, growing up in California, it being very diverse and things like that, and then having to go travel to different places, people say to me, oh, you don't sound like you're black, or or you're pretty, like how the gentleman said, you're pretty for a black girl, or you look like you're mixed or something like that. So I'm like, okay, so does me being pretty for a black girl, what does that mean? Like, I don't even know what that means. Because to me, I think I'm pretty because I'm black. And then, being mixed and things like that. Like nowadays, who's not mixed with something? You know what I mean? So, but again, what does that have to, I don't see how that's attributed to my beauty. And then, but I totally get, being a woman who is queer, and I am black, and I don't follow anybody's Eurocentric anything as it pertains to my hair. I totally understand what they're saying when they say they really don't feel like they fit in to any of those things. And then growing up, I did have hair down my back that was curly. My eyes were a little bit lighter. My skin was a little bit lighter, but I still don't think that made me any more pretty than the darker skinned girl with the kinkier hair. But then I also didn't think that made me any uglier than the white girl with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. So I think that has a lot to do with my upbringing, my surroundings, and my demographic. Because again, moving down south, they're just like, are you Hispanic? Are you this? Are you that? I'm like, where do you get this from? So I think it has a lot to do with ignorance as well, and us not educating ourselves on our culture, whether it be Asian American, whether it be African American, Black, or whether it be gay, straight, lesbian, whatever it is, at some point, I feel like we shouldn't have to try to fit into anything but what makes sense to us. What about you? What do you think as far as having to try to fit in to what naturally they tell us that is beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult for, any group of people that feel marginalized. As an African American person, I definitely feel like I experienced that. As a woman, I feel like I experienced that. But I can definitely see those same disparities amongst all people of color. And even, in situations where, just generally speaking, someone doesn't fit what the average, American or European standard of beauty is, whether that's, a larger size, whether, your hairstyle is a little different. I mean, you can even extend this to other things, like looking at, an emo, hairstyle, or somebody that likes to dress in alternative clothing or likes to wear, funky colors. Or I think across the board, there's sort of like there's this beauty standard that's marketed in America, and it's almost like, if you don't fit this particular image, or you don't look like, this particular type of person, then, you're not going to see your beauty represented in that same way. And I think that, as you stated, it transcends to all kinds of things, right? It transcends to languages, traditional ethnic clothing, different types of ethnic foods. I mean, even if you look at something as simple as like our keyboards, on our phones, when you're dealing with emojis and things of that nature, what color do they automatically come in, right? Because I mean, we have to download, or get a different version of a keyboard in order to see us represented. For a long time, you didn't see, stockings, pantyhose in certain colors. You didn't see band-aids in certain colors. You didn't see nude, garments, undergarments, and things like that in certain colors. It's not just even just our experience. I think across the board, you're kind of seeing that, in terms of dealing with anything relating to ethnic beauty, or even someone who maybe, like I said, doesn't fit the size, status quo. It's a really bad message. That they're sending, the commercialism of it. I feel like when you walk into the store, why can't I see my beauty represented on a cereal box, or, anything else in the supermarket that I might walk past? How come when we look at hair color, you only see certain types of models on the boxes? Why is it only the thin women? I mean, an average American isn't, your normal, size 4 or 6. But it's something that's, perpetuated, I think, in the media. Every person who may fall outside of that particular standard can sometimes feel as though, their beauty is not represented the way that they would, that they would ultimately prefer it to be. How do you feel as far as them talking about like being in different types of social circles? This is a question that I really wanted to ask you, because I know you came from the West Coast and then now you've gone, to the Southern region, and I'm sure that the climate can be a little bit different. The diversity is probably a little bit different. Do you kind of feel any variations of maybe how you were treated as an African American living here versus moving to the South?
Honestly, like I said, just being raised in the Bay Area, you have, I had Mexican friends, I had Samoan friends, I had Filipino friends, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had African friends, and so when you navigate your way to other areas of the U.S., that aren't as, and I would say that I was ignorant to it, because I thought everybody, just like when I left the Bay, I thought everybody should have a nations or just same thing with, the diversity aspect. When I did move from the Bay to Florida, it was, we saw a lot of people who were from the islands, and then, even having like Jamaican or Haitian and things like that. I did see a little difference in how my daughters were treated, even at school, especially because they talk so proper and things like that, because we're from California. And then even navigating here now that we're in Georgia, I do see that people aren't as diverse as we were back home, because, you have the people who are more clicked up. You'll have, people who are Black or people who are just white, or then you'll have what they call your token, right? You'll have maybe one Black guy who's with a bunch of white guys, but it was just something that was different for me because I'm so used to that melting pot, right? So just even noticing things like that, it was just like, wow, okay. I kind of almost felt bad for people like that because they don't really get to experience things like that. Even I remember a conversation that I had with my dad many years ago when I was living in California, and he came out there and he was just shocked at how many biracial relationships there were when he was seeing everywhere he saw. He was like, wait, well, whoa. And that was different for him. I was like, Dad, you don't see this kind of stuff in the Midwest because, he's in St. Louis, and it's like you see it, but not really. And like you said, those different areas and things like that, it really opens your eyes up to the way that other people even view California, or would even view those bigger metropolitan areas like New York or, San Francisco and things of that nature, LA, because, in those smaller towns and things, they're just not used to seeing such a diversity. So when I see those little groups that have only one race or only one type of, like you said, the emo or this or that or whatever. Everyone is comfortable with what they're comfortable with, but sometimes I think you should kind of mix it up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It just kind of boils down to me of how you were raised and what you feel like culturally acceptable to you. So I think that everyone is beautiful. So, and especially in their own way or in their own right, whether they like to wear their hair a certain way, want to dress a certain way, but what part that bothers me is wanting to be what society thinks that we should be and not loving yourself first. It's okay to kind of switch it up and things like that. But how do you feel about that? Can you ever think of a time that you, as a Black woman, have had to or felt like you kind of were switching it up a little bit just to kind of fit into those Eurocentric standards, just to either fit in or kind of belong in some type of way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely talked about it in terms of like getting into the industry and even like working professionally on our previous episode with like, being asked to have my hair straightened. But I also fall in the lines of like I'm an African American woman. This is my natural texture hair. I don't have chemically treated hair or anything like that. So it's an interesting kind of thing because, so even in my natural state, I was still being asked to straighten it, right? Because the idea of straight for them, looks a little different. With African Americans, as we have all kinds of different hair textures and all kinds of different shades, right? So I happen to fall in like a looser, pattern hair texture, right? But even that was seen as, when it's in its natural state and it's kind of in an afro and it's, it's seen as like untamed or, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's almost like it still doesn't fit what their idea of the version of beauty should be. So yes, I've been challenged with feeling like that. I like to color my hair a lot, and I've always done that. Change colors all the time. But sometimes I think back and I'm just like, when I tried certain colors, like, was that because of a Eurocentric beauty standard being imposed on me seeing these colors on the TV, me seeing these colors in the boxes? Is it just me wanting to try different things, or am I being influenced by something in particular? So I ask myself those types of questions all the time. I primarily went to schools that were in Asian communities. And on my volleyball team, I was like the only African American person on the team. So, the kinds of experiences that I had with like sleepovers, with going to our tournament games and the families that we would stay with during tournaments, sometimes I would be considered to be like that token. And it's interesting how people treat you when you aren't being represented in a particular community. To speak to the talking points of the video, it's like when they're talking about being in the LGBTQIA community, when they're talking about, being an Asian person, and thriving in those communities, with the gentleman that said that he was Asian and he grew up in a primarily white neighborhood and all of the African Americans lived in a more impoverished part of the neighborhood. Those are all things that we deal with. And we know that those, inequalities and those disparities happen because they are not seeing, people of color or our beauty, our language, our culture, our attire as equal to theirs, whoever is creating sort of and pushing this narrative. And I don't want to make it a black or white issue, because it isn't. I recently saw this trend that was happening on TikTok where you have like different people from different communities talking about all the things that they love about the communities outside of their communities in terms of like our beauty standards.
I have a compliment for all black women. Well, first of all, I love you so much. Second of all, if you're doing the knotless boho braids right now, respectfully, I'm so obsessed. They are the most ethereal, majestic, mermaid, waterfall works of art on your head, and it is consuming. Every time I see them in public, I have to compliment the person wearing them, because I just cannot get over how beautiful they are and that you are. And I hope that's appropriate to say. If it's not, you let me know. But I am very married, and yet these braids consume my brain. When you put charms in them, like little rose quartz pieces or gold pieces, and I know these have probably been around since the dawn of time, but for some reason I've just seen them more and more in the last year, and I'm consumed. And thank you for sharing your art with us, because my God.
I love that. I feel like we should all be celebrated for our beauty. Every single ethnic group, every single person, every single shape, every single size, every single skin tone. I just think that there's a uniqueness, and there's something beautiful about all of us. And I wish that was kind of the idea that you saw, in terms of commercialism, that they looked across the board and really considered, what women and men look like across the board, and took time to represent all different types of beauty and diversity and culture. I think we're moving in the direction where, more of that's starting to be celebrated, which I think is a beautiful thing. But you made a great point in saying that when you move to the South, that you're seeing kind of a difference in the diversity there. And so as an African-American woman, and even just in raising your kids, like, what do you think is the best approach to maybe dealing with situations where you may find yourself marginalized, or feel like maybe you're not getting that level of equality that you may want to see, either in your community or as a woman or as a person of color?
I think all of that starts at home. My kids do have Irish Scottish in their blood. So they are well aware of that, but then they also know that they are, Black women, Black girls, Black young women growing up in America down South. So although they embrace both sides, they do know, society tells them that if you have that drop of Black in you, you are Black. And they do, from what I've seen in the conversations that we've had, they do identify more with their Black side. Could be because they're being raised by a Black mother with locks. I mean, you can't really help it over here. So, but with that, they understand that they're beautiful. They understand that, because I have both of my daughters. One has thicker hair, she has locks, and then the other one, she's more brown skin. The other one is what they call high yellow, with, the softer hair. But they don't feel a type of way. One doesn't feel more beautiful or, different than the other, but because of how I'm raising them, because of how we're raising them, because of how we're teaching them, they don't see that kind of stuff. So being raised down South, to be honest with you, this is the place that they've actually felt more safe. And I actually was nervous about them not being in an area that wasn't as diverse as back home, but they love being around their people, so to speak, you know what I'm saying? But they do go to school with people of all races. So they have diversity, but not to the effect that we did growing up. But because of who they are and how they're being raised, they don't feel any type of way or any type of less than, because I instill in them that they're beautiful, but it has nothing to do with their skin color. But they do know that they're Black and beautiful. So we just make sure that we keep putting that in our kids. I break it down to them. It has only very little to do with their skin color, but just embracing every part of yourself that is beautiful and that is unique and that is different. What about you? Do you have you taught your daughter that, and does she go out into the world and exude greatness because of the things that you taught her, as far as what beauty should be?
I think she's had some challenges with navigating it. I don't know if you've seen this, but I think most people have seen this, where there's like sometimes a disparity between like African American people and biracial. And essentially, sometimes it kind of plays to like what people experience with colorism. It's sort of like the darker your skin tone, the coarser, texture of hair, the disparity or the difference between being biracial or multiracial versus being African American, sort of like in terms of where you're looking at colorism or racism, you see that probably impacted deeper, as you are moving into darker skin tones or different hair textures. I think with my daughter being in a space where a lot of the children happen to be from other ethnic groups, or they were biracial, so they were mixed children or multicultural children. And, she did have, a natural hairstyle. She did have, a coarser textured hair. I think, getting her to understand how important it is for her to embrace her beauty and to know that she's beautiful in her natural state. And I think like at one point I had to kind of accept that like she was going to, she plays around with that a lot, right? She changes her looks a lot. She changes her styles a lot, much like I do. But I wanted her to do that with always knowing that whatever she naturally had, like that was beautiful, that she didn't have to alter or change that in order to be accepted, that she didn't have to look any different. Her features didn't have to be any different in order for her to feel beautiful and to feel recognized as beautiful. And so that was kind of like the main thing. I always wanted to foster being in a space where I respected all races, all culture, and all level of diversity. And I also wanted to teach my children the same thing, to respect diversity, to respect culture, to respect people's individual choices and things of that nature. And I do think she's a very well-rounded young lady. And she definitely has friends of all types of different groups and, different orientations and things of that nature. And I think that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're all just experiencing the human experience, right? And so, if we could start being represented more equally, I think maybe it would be more acceptable, across the board, or at least people would feel more accepted. And I think that's the main thing is everyone feeling comfortable and feeling accepted. So I think it's been a great conversation. I'd like to use this show to sort of highlight and have conversations where we can talk about these things. So, I do want to encourage anyone who is listening to this episode, if you are sharing in any of these types of experiences, if you've been through these kinds of things, if you feel underrepresented or misrepresented or misunderstood, this is a place that we can have those conversations and know that we think that you're beautiful and your beauty should be accepted, your culture should be accepted. And we hope the world starts moving more in that direction.
I would also love to hear from other cultures and things of that nature, a story of when you didn't feel accepted, or even when you did feel accepted in a time that you didn't think that you were going to get that acceptance, and you were shocked that you got that you got it. I love this topic, and I really appreciate that we have this floor to speak about it. So I am just very interested to learn what everyone else's experiences are with going out into the world and being accepted, or even not being accepted, and how that makes you all feel.
You've been here with your host, Tina G, and my lovely co-host, Fancy Arlee. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to Breaking Black Podcast on all available platforms and on social media. You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Stay tuned for more.